Hello and greetings to this podcast here at Streetwise Economics. And today I am super excited that I have the privilege and pleasure of welcoming Dr. Rhinos Mutamba. And it's been a long while I've been trying to bring you on the podcast. Dr. Mutamba, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, Isaac.
Wonderful. So I'm going to give you a brief background about Dr. Mutamba. He's a very accomplished man. I know he's very humble, but I think for me, I'm very inspired by a lot of things that he has accomplished. But we will also talk about his story with the hope that, we can also learn from his experience all the way from Zimbabwe and currently based in Canada, in Ontario, and some of the work that he has been doing in the philanthropy work. And hopefully, we can find a way to apply that and see if there is a way we can support some of the work that he's doing. Now, for those who don't know Dr. Mutamba, he's a facilitator, conflict coach, leadership mentor, a meditator, and his work, as he says, is guided by Ubuntu, and he's gonna explain a bit more about that because myself, being someone who grew up in Zimbabwe, it's something that I grew up a part of because I always had this saying that it takes the whole village to raise a child. Now, academically, Dr. Moyo holds a bachelor's degree in economics from University of Trent, that is here in Canada, and a Master of Social Work in Social Justice and Diversity, and a doctorate in Social Justice Education, all from the University of Toronto. And he's currently a registered social worker with extensive experience in equity consulting, blending compassion and experience. I know he's a man of many talents. I know he plays Mbira. And Dr. Moyo, I'm so inspired with what you have accomplished and what you continue to do. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you have managed to accomplish this and many other things that I may not have included.
This my story is a bit long, but I'll try to summarize it a little bit. So I was born in Kotu, Zimbabwe, in Masvingo province.
Yes.
And my parents were very much subsistence farmers without much in terms of material sort of possessions.
Yes.
They didn't even have cows. You know, some people have cows, and I remember us not even having chickens.
Wow.
And my mom and dad separated when I was very, very young. So I ended up going to live with my mother for a while, going to school in Chiredzi and then Bechnaf Bridge, and leaving school because my mom couldn't pay the school fees, and living on the streets for a little while, on and off for about 2 years.
Wow.
And then I ended up going back to school.
Sorry to interject. What do you mean by living on the street, like as a street kid?
Yeah, I was a
Oh,
street, yeah, I was homeless.
really? Wow.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm. And then after doing that for a couple of years, I decided to go back to school on my own.
Wow.
I was very determined. I loved reading. You know, the education system fitted the way my brain worked cognitively. So I went back to grade 6, and in the first term, I got a prize, which was
Wow.
$10 for coming first in a class of about in 4 classes of about I think there were like about 100 of us. The classes were very big.
Yes.
And then with that $10, I started buying things from the market, bringing them
Wow.
to school, selling. That's what helped me to pay for my school fees.
Entrepreneur. Wow.
Yeah. So that helped me to pay for my school fees. And then my mom passed away. She was HIV positive and she was a sex worker. So she passed away
Sorry
before
about
I
that.
finished my grade 7. I went back to live with my dad. And at one point, when schools opened so that I could go to Form 1, I couldn't because there was no money.
Wow.
And I was going to go look after someone else's cows and get paid that way. And then I ended up, I think my uncle, my namesake, said, okay, come to this school where he was a principal. We'll figure something out. When I went to that school, Mutamba Secondary School. I would get kicked out a lot because I didn't have money. And then at Form 2, before writing Form 2 exams, I got kicked out. I went home and I was there for about like three weeks or so. And at that point, there was a new principal who came to my village and said, we can't let this young man not go to school. What if he comes and works for us at school, and then that money will pay his school fees? So I went and worked for the school. I managed the agricultural projects and grew an orchard, lots of mangoes that people are enjoying to this day.
Wow.
That's how I finished my O level. And then again, same thing, because we didn't have money.
Yes.
A level come in. I got recruited by this expensive school in Harare. I came out with like 9 A's at that point.
Wow,
yeah. So I didn't have money.
Wow.
So I ended up not going to school for probably the first month of A levels, and then a cousin in Harare said, "Come to Mbira. There is Harare High School. They have reasonable fees." That's how I met our common friend, Desmond Dezu, Dr. Dezu.
Yes, he was my lecturer at the University of Zimbabwe. And then he said, look, Isaac, you are about to go to Canada. I have my friend. He was very intelligent. He's actually doing really, really well in Canada. So as soon as I landed, I reached out to Dr. Moyo, and that's how we connected. Well, please continue to share your very remarkable story.
So from there, I did my A levels, finished them, and there was a program that it still continues now, but it used to be run by the United States Embassy. Now it's its own nonprofit organization. They would support students from who are economically disadvantaged to apply to universities in the US, in Germany, and in Canada. And I applied into that program. I got in, and I applied to universities in Canada, in the US, in Germany. And I got the best scholarship here in Canada at Trent University. That's how I ended up here. And that's how I ended up doing my economics. But it was my time at Trent University that I started thinking a lot about what does it mean to be human in this world where we are interconnected to the extent that we affect each other, and that we affect each other sometimes in a very positive way, that we enhance each other's quality of life. We also affect each other sometimes in a negative way, that we harm each other. So what does it mean to be human when those two possibilities are there, or a mix of both? We're never good or bad. We're always somewhere in between, right?
Yes.
And that's when I started really wanting to do community work.
Okay.
I got involved in student politics, started writing articles for the student newspaper, created an organization called the African Council at Trent, which sort of set the foundation for connecting back to the work that was happening in Zimbabwe in support of rural development, in support of grassroots organizing, entrepreneurship programs in the community, education, etc. And that sort of set the foundation for the work that I'm doing now with the Ubuntu Learning Village, which we can talk about in a little bit more detail.
Yes.
But that's kind of like my journey from Zimbabwe to here.
Yes.
And because I loved education so much, after my economics degree, I went on to social work. At that point, that resonated with me because my thinking was around really how can I serve humanity in a good way. And then after my master's, I ended up doing my PhD in social justice education, looking, and my thesis really looked at what could decolonization look like in the context of Zimbabwe specifically, but not decolonization in the sense of this intellectual sort of thinking or decolonizing the mind, which it's part of that, but not necessarily focused on decolonizing the mind per se, but what could human relationships in communities look like in such a way that we are living the essence of Ubuntu in such a way that we are uplifting each other. We're working together to create something else that is for the benefit of everybody.
And right now, I understand you have been teaching at quite prestigious university, University of Waterloo. What have you been teaching? And is that something that you are passionate about? Can you say about someone who wants to?
I love education. I love education. So I've taught at Centennial College. I taught at Centennial College. I taught social justice courses and indigenous studies courses. And then I taught at Laurentian University, indigenous social work. So indigenous social work with a focus on working with indigenous communities here in Canada. And then I've taught at University of Toronto, focusing on community development, specifically looking at creative approaches to community development. And then University of Waterloo is where I've taught for the longest in social work. And most of my courses, right now, I only teach one course, but I've taught social justice courses, I've taught mental health courses, and the one course that I continue to teach is the master's levels course on leadership.
Oh, very interesting. So, Dr. Moyo, please tell me a little bit more about how, because I also have a similar journey. I grew up in the countryside, but today it's mostly about you. But I just couldn't help but to draw a lot of similarities on your story, because it was really tough for us even my parents to raise the school fees. And then fortunately, I was so passionate about education because I saw it as a panacea, as a solution to getting out of poverty. Ended up at the University of Zimbabwe, where I then met our mutual friend, Dr. Ndezu, and worked with few non-profit organizations, and then got a scholarship that supported economically disadvantaged students, the Mastercard Foundation Scholarship, that financially enabled me to come at the University of British Columbia. So I really can relate a lot to say, because my life in itself is a testimony of what education can, open doors for. Now, thinking of other kids, maybe who might not necessarily just in Zimbabwe, but in any other part of the world, maybe the Philippines or Asia, or who may be in a situation like that. What can you say about the power of education? How do you see it like having transformed your life?
Without education, I wouldn't be here. I won't be here. I wouldn't have been able to. I don't know. You can never really tell what would have happened if something didn't happen. But I am confident in saying that because of education, I have been able to grow myself, personal development as a human being. And it has allowed me to think in a way that has informed the actions that I take in the world right now. It has also given me the skills to allow me to earn an income that I can take care of myself, my family, and the larger family that I support in Zimbabwe. So education is critical. If I was to be a god and I could like throw magic in the world and maybe change people's minds or change leaders who make policy decisions, I would say the first priority when we're thinking about budgets, when we're thinking
Yes.
about any policies, it is education. It is so essential that
Wow.
we have to understand it as not just like a thing that people do because we just
They
do
have
it,
to do it.
but
Yes.
actually as fundamental to any metric of success in any place in the world. Any metrics that you can think about. Think of political stability that is correlated to education, because the way people think also informs how they show up in political relationships.
Yes.
And education has a lot to do with that. Think of economic matrices. An
Yes.
educated population creates ideas, innovates.
Yes. Yes.
And that improves the livelihoods of everybody. Think of environmental stewardship. The knowledge to understand that we live in a container. And if we do not have this healthy container, we won't exist, comes from education. Right? So almost every metric that you can think about, you can connect it. There's a direct correlation with education.
Yes.
So I cannot emphasize enough how fundamental education is. And to add to that, it's like education does not necessarily need to only take the form of school, right?
Yes.
Formalized education as we understand, or schooling as we understand it.
Yes.
But it could be this investment in continuous learning.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Interesting. So now, can you also share a little bit more about your work that you do at Ubuntu? Because I have also been involved in social work, but I have learned that it's quite difficult to raise, like funding to run the programs. And my approach now has been to kind of like, I'm a retail trader and investor, so I'm kind of like building my portfolio. And I'm hoping that maybe some years I can be at a point, maybe I can say, let's say I'm gonna set aside 100,000 on a foundation that, like we can give back to the community, maybe in Zimbabwe or in Canada. Because in as much as I think they were brilliant ideas, because I wanted education, empowerment, agriculture, and all these ideas. We just couldn't achieve that because, we needed funding to run the programs. So tell us a little bit more about Ubuntu. What is Ubuntu? What do you do? And also, most importantly, how can people support? And we'll share the links to the website and also some of the work that you have done on this video as well.
Thank you for asking that question. Let me begin here. That we all find ourselves doing different aspects of the work that is needed in the world to support others who are not in the same position as ourselves.
Yes, I agree.
So when I hear you say, I want to set aside money and then do this, I'm like, amazing.
Thank you.
Right? And then on the other side, I'm here going, I have this space.
Yes.
I have created the conditions, or together with community, we've created the conditions for the community to come together, to collaborate, support each other, and innovate. Right? There is a container there that then, if there is finance, we can channel it through that container to support different initiatives. So what I was focused on, and this actually comes out of my PhD dissertation. So the critique that I have of the schooling approach to education is that sometimes there's so much focus on ideas that are not directly connected to people's lives, right?
Interesting, yeah.
And so I wanted to do a thesis that was connected to creating something that would live longer than the words that I put on paper.
Interesting, wow.
So I started building Ubuntu Learning Village when I started my PhD.
Oh, wow.
So if you look at the thesis, if you have time one day,
Yes.
Actually, the chapters are structured in the process that I went through building the village.
Okay.
So chapter 1, kind of like creating the land,
Yes.
getting the lay of the land, understanding the land. Like that's what I was doing.
Yes.
Right. And then other chapters, they all follow that. So each chapter begins with kind of like a narrative of my process, or kind of just like an interaction that I had as I'm building Ubuntu Learning Village.
Yes.
Right. And the idea of Ubuntu Learning Village is inspired by this notion of kind of like answering the question of, if it was up to us, if I had all the choice, what would I do to build positive human relationships? That is the question for me. What would I do? And I'm like, okay, so I have a bit of money. I had a little bit of money then, and I bought the land, right? And I was like, okay, what then do I do with this land? Because the land, beautiful, but it's more interesting for me, given my orientation towards Ubuntu, which is Ubuntu as a philosophy is that we are all connected. We are all related. We are all dependent on each other. In fact, my identity as a person is only possible because I am implicated in relationships. And it's not just relationships with other people, it's relationship with the land as well. Relationship with the water, with the trees.
Yes.
I am who I am because of all that is. That is a core, if we're gonna simplify Ubuntu, that is what that Ubuntu means.
Yes.
So how do I bring people together? To honor my connection as an Ubuntu person to all these pieces that I have named. But not only that, I'm not just an observer of this network of relationships. I'm a participant.
Yes.
And I want to be a participant in a good way. Right? How do I then activate that awareness of our interconnectedness into something more meaningful than just an idea? So I started bringing people together in the community, shared this dream that I had. I would love to make this space a place where people gather to create. We started with culture, folks learning Mbira, learning dance, growing food, and then we moved on to quote-unquote programs. So women's empowerment programs, health programs, environmental programs that involve collecting garbage and turning it into beautiful things, upcycling. And then the community had this need for a school that was closer to them because most children were walking on average about 14 kilometers a day
to get to school.
That's when Ubuntu Free School became a reality. And other than the distance, there are also other barriers to education for children, which is money to pay for school fees, because Zimbabwe children have to pay school fees from kindergarten. There's also money to buy uniforms and shoes. There's also money to buy books. There's also money to contribute to, sometimes the council schools, families pay money to build classrooms. And so we said, okay, we want our school to be free. We want our school to be as barrier-free as possible. And that means doing away with anything that will ask families who are already struggling to pay money. The families had other things that they could contribute. Which is kind of like an idea that I've been thinking about a lot around investment, right? We can either invest money or we can invest time.
Yes.
And they had time and skills.
Yes.
Right. So they could build, they could cook,
Yes.
they could go harvest wood to make roofs for the classrooms. They could go harvest thatch grass to make, as long as we're using indigenous architecture.
Yes.
There were people in the community who were skilled to do that for us.
Wow.
And we did not need to invent, to maybe copy Western style of buildings where we will be forced to then buy a lot of things.
Yes.
Right? We wanted to work with what the community had.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what we did. And now the school is, we have 93 students.
Wow.
From kindergarten to grade 6. And the dream is to continue growing it to get to university level.
Yes.
Yeah, so the first cohort that we began with in junior kindergarten is now at grade 6. And then that cohort is going into grade 7. We're just building that, the school that way.
And where do you get the teachers? And I would understand as an economist, as much as you are, Dr. Mutamba, to say, Mutamba, to say, there are definitely some operational costs, right?
Yes.
That have to be. How do you foot that? How do you subsidize that?
Subsidize that. So here's what we do. Because I have been involved in different things in my lifetime, here in the West at least, in music, in storytelling, in social activism, in food related stuff. I have taught in multiple institutions. Right? I work as a consultant in other contexts. So I have built this network of relationships. And that network of relationships has been very supportive in providing the financial resources to cover the operational costs of Ubuntu Free School.
So do you see it sustainable, Dr. Mutamba, and I understand the whole concept of, barrier-free education, like free, but in economics, there's no free lunch, right? So do you see it's sustainable, as a sustainable
who is
model?
Covering the cost, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think the model of relying on donations in the long term is not sustainable.
Yes.
In the sense that the donations tend to be connected to my own relationships.
Yes.
Right? What happens when I die? Right?
It's a tough question. It's a tough reality, but
Exactly.
So
So we have also been thinking about what is it that we can do at a local level that will generate income to continue sustaining this school. So we just started a project, a horticultural project, where about 14 of the women from the village are growing food for sale, are growing vegetables for sale.
Okay.
And a percentage of that income goes to the school.
Wonderful.
And then I have a space, a commercial property in Gutu, and we're going to develop that into, we're trying to figure out what is it that will be, that I'm passionate about, but also that will generate income. So we're still thinking about that, and that the
real estate investment,
exactly, is gonna go to supporting the school. We at one point we had a restaurant in Gutu that focused on indigenous foods.
Yes.
Which was, it was quite popular.
Wow.
And when we're making money from it, some of the money would go to Ubuntu Free School. So I'm kind of creating all these entrepreneurial projects that would support the school. And part of our sort of what we talk about with our students is the ethos of Ubuntu.
Yes.
So they've gone through this school. They're going to grow.
Yes.
Right? They're going to hopefully earn something.
Yes.
What can they do to support,
to
give back? And we are investing in that, in those conversations, so that whoever goes through the school remains connected to it.
Interesting. And
Mhm.
today, when I woke up, I had a very busy morning. But when I checked on Facebook, I managed to see Lauren Guyo. She's a socialite, very
Mhm.
influential individual in Zimbabwe. She was at Ubuntu, from what I saw on the video,
Yes.
right? Tell us a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
So on it, I posted. How do I put it? I'm stumbling now. But what
Yeah.
happened was I saw a video of her saying
Yes.
that she had done something, and then I made a comment like, "Could you support our school?"
Wow.
Right, and then she went to the Ubuntu Free School Facebook page, and she's like, "Where is the school? I want to
Mm.
get all these things."
Wow.
Yeah, and then I connected her with folks on the ground,
Yes.
and she came through.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very remarkable. And I have seen from the videos and I've seen you go sometimes with other
Mhm.
people and lecturers, and also kind of like to support and to have this cultural and educational exchange. How has that been going as well?
That's amazing. I actually forgot to say that. Like, one of the ways that we're generating income is through hosting people from around the world. So when
Okay.
folks come and they learn from us, and we also learn from them when they are there,
Yes.
they pay a bit of money, and
Yes.
then that also gets invested into the work that we're doing.
That's wonderful. And I hope when I go back to Zimbabwe at some point, I will pass through Ubuntu Village.
Please,
I
please,
couldn't manage the
please,
last time I
please,
went there
please,
to just see,
please.
because I really admire the work that you do. Now, if you don't have anything to add more in this, I will add the website and how, if there are people who want to support this work,
Mhm.
they can support. But I think it's a very incredible thing to do. Now,
Can
Dr.
I just
Moy,
want to add something. I just
please,
want to add something.
please,
So in thinking about education, and because my obsession
please.
is education, and I think
Yes,
of education
yes,
just not in the schooling sense, like
yes,
schooling, yes, and
yes,
more and plus, right?
yes,
One of the things that we are obsessed with at Ubuntu
yes,
is just learning throughout the life cycle. So we have kind of like learning pods for different people interested in different things.
yes,
We also have people who come to Ubuntu. One of the things that we say to them is like, Ubuntu for us, we are here to learn,
yes,
and we're also here to educate. Right? So when you show up at Ubuntu, you
yes,
teach us something.
yes, mm,
As you also learn from us. So there's
yes,
this like ongoing dialogue around learning, and it's what gives that space the life that it has.
mm,
This continuous exploration with people from different parts of the world. I'm in January and February.
mhm.
In January, there was a dentist from Argentina who was there.
Wow,
He
wow,
came with all his equipment. He removed some teeth,
yes,
gave dental services, and left his equipment. But what he
wow,
did was trained a couple of the teachers to do
mm,
basic dental services on children,
yes,
right?
yes,
Amazing. So it's a skill
wonderful,
that remains in the village, right?
yes,
And
yes,
then in February,
yes.
there was a couple from Canada, from BC actually.
Oh, interesting.
One of them is a massage therapist.
Oh,
Other
British
one,
Columbians rock, we rock.
yes, yes, yes. One is a marimba player. So when
Mhm,
he was there, the marimba player taught marimba, because we also
mhm.
have a set of marimba.
Yes,
And then the massage therapist gave massage therapy and also taught a few people how to do massage.
yes,
Now that is a skill that is there. So there's always this exchange of not just knowledge in terms of ideas, but
yes,
practices that enhances the community.
yes,
We also have internet in rural
yes.
Zimbabwe. We have Wi-Fi
Wow,
and internet and
yes,
computers.
wow. At Ubuntu Village.
at Ubuntu Village that give the people their access to learning resources from anywhere in the world.
Wow.
So we are very obsessed with learning.
Yes.
And that's why it's called Ubuntu Learning Village.
Yes. This is very interesting. And I wish I had probably asked you to bring your Mbira to maybe just play for us for a second. Do you have it by any chance?
I always have it close by. Hold on a second.
Okay, thank you. Now, Dr. Moyo, I've seen you play sometimes on the streets in Toronto, and and you have been playing, traveling around the world playing the Mbira. But before you play, do you wanna maybe just give us a brief? What is Mbira?
Okay. So this is how it looks like inside.
The instrument.
Mbira is the national instrument of Zimbabwe.
Wow.
Officially. I mean, there are many instruments in Zimbabwe. I think it's an interesting thing. But mentioning that it's a national instrument, it's just a way of me saying it's a very important instrument for our culture. And it is an instrument that is used to entertain. And also it is used in ceremonies in which we invite the ancestors to come in our midst to support us in different ways.
Yes, and before you start playing, I'm going to tell you a brief story. I was studying at the University of Zimbabwe. So this other time I would pass through, there was a pub in Zimbabwe in downtown, and they would have Mbira prayers. So what surprised me was when this outfit was playing the Mbira, people started being emotional and crying. So please explain to me
what's happening.
What's happening, because I couldn't quite understand why people would be old men like starting to cry.
I like that. Everywhere I play, someone cries.
Wow.
Everywhere I play. So this is just my interpretation, my understanding of what's happening there. There are two ways to think about it. One is there's a spiritual way of thinking about it.
Okay.
Right? The spiritual way is if someone gets into that emotional state in the sort of Shona spiritual cosmology, it means that there is a spirit close by.
Wow.
Right? That is affecting that person, or that is trying to connect with that person.
Wow.
Right? And then, of course, there's kind of like the neurological sort of angle to it, which is that when you meditate, right, it puts your brain at ease in such a way that you're able to connect with your deeper emotions. And you end up not having necessarily control like that you'd have in other situations where you might want to feel like crying and then you go like, no, I'm not going to do that. But when you're so relaxed and you are so authentic, it just comes out.
Wow.
Well, and the sound of Mbira is so meditative that it gets you there.
Well, let's see if I'm going to cry now, Dr. Moyo. Can you please try to make me cry?
I won't take the challenge, but I'll play Mbira. I'll play Mbira.
Okay, thank you.
This song is called Mukai Tiende.
Okay. Yeah, wow. I was about to cry. This is a very interesting instrument. So you compose, you write, you compose music, and it's also another way that you fundraise and connect with the community. Well, I grew up hearing about Mbuya Stella tuition. And basically, do you want to summarize maybe for our English speaking audience, like what, the import of the song that you were playing?
So I want to address the
Please do.
Mbuya tuition reference.
Yes, please
Stella
do.
Chueshe is my first Mbira teacher.
Oh,
Yeah, we're very close. She's a very close
wow.
friend of mine. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So she's the one who taught me the first two songs that I ever played, gave me my first Mbira, gave me my
Yes.
first Deze.
Wow.
Yeah, and whenever she came to Canada to
Mhm.
do tours or play out, she would live with me.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's an icon,
Yes.
and also there was Chuone Somaraire as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
And Mbira, it has a special place in the not only in the Zimbabwean history, but I think it's more like music. We have these musicians and even the liberation struggle in Zimbabwe. For those who don't know, Zimbabwe was colonized by the British, and the freedom fighters, they would play this music to kind of like boost morale. So
Hmm.
it is a very special place. Okay,
Yeah.
so you please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. So the song is called Mukai Tende, which means wake up, let's go.
Yes,
It's kind of like a call to action,
yes.
right? And the lyrics that I was singing actually were popularized by Thomas Mafumo.
Wow.
Um, and just saying, tell me where the others went,
Yes,
right? I can't
yes.
do this alone. Sort of
Wow.
like rallying up, the community,
Support the
rallying up
community.
the relationships, support to
Yes.
towards movement.
Wow, that's
Hmm.
very interesting. And like I said, I am very fond of the work that you do. So sometimes I go on YouTube and I see you are playing on the roadside, and people come and they want to learn more about Mbira. And sometimes I have noticed that even sometimes when I'm walking, you don't know what people are going through. So sometimes
Hmm.
just that impact that someone can then
Hmm.
say might be thinking of something bad, and then have that positivity out
Hmm.
of that. It's something that is very interesting.
Hmm.
Now, is there something else, Dr. Mutamba, that you'd want to share with the audience, and can then give you an opportunity to share some concluding remarks, if you will?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is that I do all this work at Ubuntu Learning Village,
Mhm.
and then I also do work here with
Yes,
my consulting company, Bloom Consulting. I'll share with
yes,
you the link.
sure.
And what I find interesting about sort of these two spaces is
Yes,
how I sort of at Ubuntu I have time to experiment with ideas,
yes,
right? I have time to experiment with the notion of human relationships and relationships to the land.
mhm,
Um, and I find that I bring all that learning into the work that I do with organizations here,
yes,
where there's a bit of a different cultural ethos in the sense of, in as much as people work together, collaborate
yes,
together,
yes,
individualism is still very strong,
yes,
right? At the end of the day, it just, I might be part of a relationship
yes.
because it furthers my own interests.
Interests, yeah.
Whereas the Ubuntu perspective is I am in the relationship to
Yes,
further the interests of the collective.
of the
And I find
collective.
when I bring that philosophy here, it resonates so much with
Yes,
people. It's the lens that I use when I am doing mediation,
yes.
right?
Okay.
And when we think about like conflict, and
Yes,
conflict, instead of it being this thing that we should be scared about and
yes.
mostly run away from because it's uncomfortable,
Yes,
if you take an Ubuntu lens, it's an opportunity to actually deepen relationships, to connect
yes,
even more, right? So I
yes.
bring that lens into the work here, and I find it has really supported a lot of organizations in thinking
Mm.
more about the human element, about
Mm-hmm.
relationships,
Mm-hmm.
about thinking of the workplace as not this space that people come to exchange transactions, but
Yes,
actually build connections because we spend most of our time in the workplace,
yes,
not at
that's
home.
true. Yes,
And that is important in a
yes,
world where we are wired to belong, we are wired to connect. We are
yes,
always seeking connection,
yes,
right? So I
yes,
find like that is how I bridge these two worlds.
yes.
I think that's
Interesting.
that's very important in just the way that I I am like that. Just that is critical
Wow.
to my path in the world.
And I just remembered something I wanted to ask you because, it's something that as someone who grew up in Zimbabwe, people call it like black tax, right? Like this idea
Right.
that
Right.
sometimes some folks back home, they are always
Mhm.
asking for money and stuff like
Mhm.
that. How do you deal with that as someone who is a diasporan? Because most
Yeah.
of the friends that I talk to, whether it's from, African countries, Philippines, or even to some extent, even in Asia, right?
Mhm.
They are like, okay, I have to send money back home, right? It's a different, what's your comment on that?
Yeah. I actually find the notion of black text
Yeah.
to be odd.
Yes.
You know,
Why?
if I were to define black text, I
Yes.
would actually define it very differently.
Okay,
And
please do for
my
us.
definition would be the black text is the cost of racism that black people have to contend with.
Oh, I
That is the
see.
black text, right? When we support our communities,
Yes.
when we care for each other,
Yes.
that is an economy of love.
Wow. That's profound.
And the phrase economy of love, I heard it from a friend of mine, Michelle.
Yes.
Um, it is based on that, again, idea that we are connected, we are interdependent, even
Yes.
in situations in which we do not want to recognize it.
Yes.
We are always existing because of something else or someone else, right?
Yes.
You probably drank coffee this morning. I don't know if you drink coffee. I don't, but you probably
Yeah,
drank
I
coffee.
drink
You probably
tea.
drank
Yeah.
tea. But did you grow
Yes.
that tea?
Maybe it was grown in Kenya.
Right. But
Yes.
if you think of that interaction
Yes.
with tea as a relational moment, it means that the
Mhm.
person that made it is no longer a stranger to you,
Yes. I
right?
agree.
Think
Yes.
of what you're wearing. Did
Yes.
you make it? Did you grow
No.
the cotton? You
No.
know what I'm trying to say? So
Yes.
we might want to deny, or not even, I don't think we're denying it, but we don't want to surface how we are
Yes.
so dependent on
On
these
each other.
people, on these spaces that we have kind of estranged, when we actually have intimate relationships through these
Oh,
ways that we are consuming,
yes.
we are surviving in the world. So
Yes.
there's no black text, there's no text.
Yes.
There is supporting each other. And I
Yes.
think that the
Being there for each
idea,
other. Yeah.
yeah, like I understand that um,
Hmm.
I understand that you need to think of yourself.
Yes.
Exactly. You
To have a
cannot look
balance.
exactly. You cannot look after the collective without looking after yourself,
Yes.
right? But
Yes.
those things are happening at the same time. They need to happen
Yes.
at the same time. And if it
Yes.
happens that I have more resources and I share with others,
Yes.
that is a beautiful thing.
Yes. I
And
agree.
it doesn't need to be labeled as something, that is
Yes.
problematic. It's like if we were to um, create a concoction
Yes.
that will make the world better, I think that concoction should inspire people to share.
I agree with you.
Mm.
And I think to the extent that you take care of yourself and giving back to the community, I think is a very good thing. And that's
Mm.
also another thing that I do in a small way. If I have extra, I
Mm-hmm.
support my family, I support others. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I think more importantly, if there is a way to teach them to be able to fish on their own rather than
Yeah,
giving them fish
yeah,
all the time, that's
yeah.
very
Yeah,
interesting.
that's part of it. That's part of it. I think one of the things that I wanted to say, in
Yes,
addition, like, when I was talking about Bloom and Ubuntu and the work of bridging those two worlds, another thing that
yes,
I wanted to say was when we think about investment,
yes,
right? Um, I think we tend to think about money, right?
yes,
Investing to growing that. Yeah.
yes,
But we also have to think about social investment
yes,
as critical
yes,
right? As
Can you explain
critical.
more about that,
Yeah. So
Dr.
what I mean by social investment is um, putting in resources, whether that is time, whether that is funds, whether that is
Yes.
like other materials, to support um, initiatives that build up social capital,
Okay.
right? That builds
Yes.
up human relationships, that
Yes.
builds up learning,
Yes.
that goes towards taking care of the environment.
Yes.
That is as equally important,
Yes.
right? So some of us are going to invest money, some of us are going to invest into these social causes, and
Yes.
that's all important work.
Yes.
And there's intersections. It's not like there's a
Yes.
dividing line between the two. It's
Yes.
intersections because the people that donate to Ubuntu
Yes.
are people who have a little bit of money that they might have
Yes.
made from investing in other ways, right? And that
Yes.
is amazing. And then the
Yes.
investments that we are doing at Ubuntu,
Yes.
right, is gonna grow the skills base of the people that are participating in our programs. Those people
Yes.
can take care of themselves eventually,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for explaining that. Is there any anything else that you'd like to share, Dr. Mutamba, before we end this podcast conversation?
I think before we begin this conversation,
Yeah.
we're talking about government.
Yes.
I'm not going to go into talking about government right now, but
Yeah.
one thing that I said was um, the ingredient that is needed for leadership is love. Right?
Yes.
And I would say that the ingredient that is needed for anything that we're doing is
Yes.
love.
Yes.
Right? Whether we're doing finance, whether we're doing social community work, whether we're doing
Yes.
environmental work, there has to be a love there.
Yes.
And circumstances can change, but that
Yes.
love becomes the light that is always guiding actions. And I find
Yes.
that like situating myself in that notion of love for the
Yeah.
community and a lot of
Mhm.
notion of love for the other
Mhm.
allows me to continue
Yeah.
when things are
Yes.
hard. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Just it's all about love at the end of the day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mutamba. I know it took us some time for us to finally, have this conversation, but I'm very grateful for the privilege of your time. And to the viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope you enjoyed the Mbira instrument and the rich insights from Dr. Mutamba's experiences. I hope to see you guys in the next episode. Until next time. Bye bye and take care. Thank you so much.